host of The Crucible. He is a political commentator, political satirist, and blood sport debater. His feminist debate opponent is Pixie. As she goes online, she's the co-host of the Sugar Spice podcast. She graduated from University of Florida with a triple major, getting her BS in psychology and BA in philosophy and economics. Now, you can each have an opening statement, and the rest of the show will just be an open debate/conversation. Pixie will go first, and then Andrew. So go ahead, Pixie.
Hi, I'm Pixie. I was asked to basically begin with a general worldview. Obviously, that's really complicated and really hard because the world's complicated and hard. But if I had to say what I generally believe in, most of my principles are utilitarian-like, the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of people with the least amount of harm possible. Other than that, I'm a big fan of rules like veil of ignorance, right? If we didn't know what race, gender, whatever component you want to say, and we're going to be thrust into society, how would that society ideally be? I just want to live in a world that is as equal as possible in terms of opportunity and, you know, with a basic standard of living. That is my ideal. Obviously, life be a little bit more complicated than that. And even in terms of utilitarianism, God.
Party foul. Party foul, it's okay.
Utilitarianism.
Keep going, you're fine.
Yeah, I still believe that.
How many utils did you just lose?
So many. I am going to the bad place.
It's negative 10 utils.
I still think that we have certain duties towards, you know, our loved ones or, you know, our friends, family members, etc., etc. But yeah, overall, I have more of a utilitarian perspective on things. So that's my general worldview.
Peace out, you too, homie.
Sorry, did not mean to press that. I had to move. I was cleaning up the popcorn.
And then I guess we can get into your views on feminism.
Yeah. Do you want me to do that right now? Or
Yeah,
do you
for
want
your opening. So
Yeah.
I was just requesting that you gave me your worldview so
Yeah.
that I knew what prism you're looking through as you kind of tell me what your takes are on feminism.
Yeah, so basically my general view on feminism is that we've made a lot of long strides when it comes to equality. I still think that there's certain like gender stereotypes or behaviors that we like punish for both men and women. I do think men are sometimes at a slight advantage when it comes to certain power structures in place because of old notions of what it means to be masculine or feminine. But yeah, I just want to strive to be in a world where, you know, a guy can act sad or emotional and they're not punished for it, and where a woman can act like, you know, straightforward or confident or direct and not be punished for that either. That's just where I'm at.
So just to reiterate very quickly, your general worldview is utilitarianism. The only thing I just wanted to quickly follow up on is you said that you have duties. Does this fall under threshold deontology where you feel that there's duties up until a point and then you switch over to utilitarianism?
Yeah, basically. I mean, if there was one moral system that solved it all, we wouldn't be constantly debating about this in philosophy, right? Like, this wouldn't be a thing that's still talked like in academia for forever. But basically, even though I ascribe a lot to like to utilitarianism in the sense of the greatest amount of good for greatest amount of people, there is still a level of duty that you have towards your friends or family. So for example, let's say you get slightly more utility by, in a hypothetical reality, right? This might not make sense, whatever. In a hypothetical reality, lying to everybody about your friend in a negative manner for whatever reason. Let's say that just produces more utility in the world.
Yeah.
Well, then there's two things there. I think you can probably still create a better world where you don't have to stoop to such a level to lie in a malicious manner, most likely. And then second of all, you also shouldn't do that because that's your friend. And I guess what I'm trying to say here, what I'm trying to get at, is that there's a way to be good to each other on a personal level that I think a framework of duty explains better than a framework of utility. So you could have a framework of utility when it comes to like general policies, like on a large scale, whatever. But when it comes to personally, like, how should I treat you? Should I treat you with kindness? That's where you get a little bit more individualistic. Obviously, sometimes these things can like contradict. Again, moral philosophy, as you know, is pretty complicated in terms of like academia. There's so many different arguments. I'm open to learning, to talking more about it. It's just obviously something that people still wrestle with a lot because there are a lot of moral conundrums out there.
Yeah, I don't think that you could explain the entirety of your worldview in a single opening statement, right?
Yeah.
I'm just kind of looking for the key point principles. So utilitarianism, the basic harm principle, and then a threshold where it meets duty. So duty has to be in play there in some points because you don't think that utilitarianism itself can
Covers
accommodate everything. Okay. So there's like a bit of threshold deontology. All right. So I'll dive into to my opener here. So I came to Christianity first logically rather than spiritually. The spiritual part of it came after the logical part. That actually is very common with people, more common than people know. So to give you kind of my framework and understanding, I'm an Eastern Orthodox Christian, so that's the viewpoint that I look at the world from. But when
Already.
Intel Wild donated $100. Andrew, for all of us on the crucible/whatever side, please wreck this woke, leftist bluehead, feminist Nazi, tree-hugging, carbon footprint, gender pronoun Kuma.
Blue-haired. That's where I draw the line. For everything else is fine, but I clearly do not have blue hair.
She only has green hair sometimes
Yeah, sometimes.
in edited thumbnails.
Yeah, so I'm an Eastern Orthodox Christian. But to give you an overview of what that means, I'm going to kind of accommodate Catholics and then what I would consider most Protestants would consider to be a Christian. So from my worldview, knowledge is not possible without there being a God. It's not even possible. And here's what I mean by that. Without an unerring standard or a standard which is unchanging, your ability to know something is going to be arbitrary. Any appeal that you make, any standard appeal that you make to anything ever is going to reduce to relativism, and it's going to reduce to being arbitrary, no matter what. So because that standard doesn't exist, I actually believe that there is truth which you can know and knowledge which you can know because I appeal to the standard which is unchanging. The reason we're Trinitarians, meaning we believe in the triune nature of God, is because first in John 1:1, the Word was with God and God was the Word. Okay? What this is saying is if you move forward to 1:14 in John, it says, and the Word became flesh. So that would be Jesus Christ. So in the beginning, there's the Word was God, the Word was with God, and then in 1:14, the Word becomes flesh. So that means Jesus Christ is God, right? Part of the nature of God. John 14:6, Jesus Christ says, I am the way, the truth, and the light. Okay, so the key word there for us is truth, right? The way, the truth, and the light. So in philosophy, a justified true belief is knowledge, right?
I mean, Aristotle was the one, or not, I can't remember who exactly. But then
knowledge is a justified true belief. So you can have a justified belief, but that doesn't mean it's true. So since we don't have a justified true belief and we believe that the truth is God and must be God because that's the only inerrant, unchanging standard that there could ever be for truth, essentially I feel like most everything that anybody tells me who's not a Christian is a lie because it has no foundational grounding for it to be true. It's moving towards some kind of standard which is completely arbitrary. So I think that your worldview in and of itself destroys the very ability for you to even have knowledge. So that is my worldview and how I see things. Now, I'm not here to have a precept debate with you about Christianity, right? But I did want you to understand my viewpoint and how it is that I think about Christianity. And I think most Christians think of it this way.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel bad because I know we're supposed to talk about feminism, but I want to ask you if you've ever heard of Gettier problems.
Yes.
Yeah,
but
what do you think
the
about
thing
them?
is that those can be reconciled through the Orthodox worldview as well. Okay, so you're talking in the Gettier problems of the laws of logic having problems, like you could be half in a room, half in a different room, stuff like this. But these are semantic issues, right?
No. Here, let me give you an example of a Gettier problem. So, for example, let's say you are driving by in your car,
Yeah.
and then you pass, what is it? You pass a barn.
Yeah.
And you say, there's a barn.
Yeah.
It's justified. You saw it. It's a belief that you're holding, and it's true. Except in this case, in this scenario, that was actually a fake barn, and right behind it was a real barn. I know that sounds weird, but obviously it's just theoretical.
Sure.
Technically, your belief is still true. You said there's a barn over there. But can you really say that's knowledge? Did you truly know there was a barn there when what you were pointing to was, in fact, a fake barn?
But I mean, that would just move into precept. So whatever standard applied knowledge that you would have be relative anyway. So who cares if there's a barn behind it or not? Because it's going to be whatever you're going to appeal to know that there's a barn behind it. It's going to be an arbitrary standard, which can be reduced to relativism.
I mean, does it have to be arbitrary? I guess.
Yeah, you can never. I don't see how if you didn't have a standard which was unchanging, meaning could not be changed, how it wouldn't reduce to a relative standard.
Okay, I'm gonna put it this way.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say that there is a certain period in time where you had this village. And in this village, they decided that like when the water falls down, when you're getting water, whatever, you should give it to the old people first because they need it more, it's more important that they get water first, whatever. Sorry. And let's say over time, everything gets better, like their water systems get better, blah, 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 things become more evolved, more advanced. And now that rule is arbitrary. Things changed, the circumstances changed, but it doesn't mean that rule is always arbitrary. What I'm trying to convey here is that...
No, okay. That rule would not have been arbitrary. So the meaning of arbitrary, meaning without system or something like this, but it would have been relative.
Yeah.
And that's the point. It would have been a relative rule. So it wouldn't have been anything that you were basing it on other than some metric you made up.
But even though it was a metric you made up, it was a metric that was tied down towards like our physical reality of how we interact with each other, how the environment is.
But could somebody have come in and said, don't give the water to the old people first? And they could have agreed to that, right?
They could have agreed to that, but that doesn't mean that they did what was in the best interest of the society.
But that means that the standard can be changed. So if the standard can be changed, the standard is relative. For instance, the laws of logic can't be changed.
Okay.
So for instance, can you tell me how you would change the laws of logic without appealing to the laws of logic first?
No. I'll agree with you that the laws of logic can't be changed. But I think what I'm trying to disagree with you here on is just because something can be changed doesn't necessarily make it arbitrary.
No. Arbitrary in this case, if you're talking about the definition of has no system to it, I believe that you can come up with all sorts of systems and then it's no longer arbitrary, but it's still relative. It's still made up. And so what I'm saying is that the laws of logic are not relative. They're not made up. They exist as a metaphysical reality, and they must exist as a metaphysical reality because they can't be changed. And if you can change them, I would love to know how you could.
Can I ask you a question on, like, how do you define, and this sounds funny or weird, but how do you define, like, objectivity?
Well, it depends on what you mean by objectivity. So, like, an easy way might be correspondence theory of truth, that which corresponds with reality, you could say, is objective. There's many different theories of truth which are encompassed in Christianity, but I think correspondence theory would be fine for us to use as some definition for objective truth.
Yes. Okay. And just to you believe in objective truth. You would have to because you believe in...
At objective standard. So if you believe in a subjective truth and everything is relative, then, like, for your moral standard, what do I even care about your moral standard for?
Yeah. Okay. So, because in my head... What, are you writing she's crazy?
No.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Where was I?
We're talking about subjective.
Yes, subjective, objective, what that which relates to an outside reality. So I think, and we agree with this definition, just making it crystal clear.
Well, I'm not sure if we agree on it or not. I don't think we need to for the purpose of the debate. I'm just trying to express to you what my viewpoint is as we go into the debate on feminism.
Yeah.
And showing that I'm probably not going to agree with your principles of utilitarianism, nor you with my principles of Christianity. But that doesn't mean that if we both can look at like correspondence theory or something like that which corresponds with reality, that maybe we couldn't find some common ground here on feminism itself.
Yeah, I agree. I think just my main issue that I take is that when you are, because I also believe in objective morality, but I believe in it, I think, for a different reason that you do. And there's so many thoughts, but here, I'll start here. So basically, I think my problem with your worldview, or with how you're starting it out, is that you're saying, oh no, like there has to be an unchanging God, because then anything else is relative and therefore like subjective. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No.
Okay.
No. What I'm saying to you is that knowledge itself is not possible. If knowledge itself, the thing that you appeal to, has an arbitrary metric, knowledge becomes impossible. You can't know anything if you say there's no standard which is unchanging for which we can know a thing by. Therefore, no belief you have can be true, because knowledge itself is a justified true belief.
Yeah, okay.
So by having a subjective worldview, from my worldview, you have destroyed the very capacity to even have knowledge.
Yeah, and I think where the major disagreement comes from is that things can be changing, but you can still know of something despite the changes.
How do you know if you can't appeal to a standard from which, if you always appeal to it, is unchanging? How could you ever know that?
Yeah, how do you know? Okay, maybe you can help me answer.
So,
this. Yeah.
This beer, right? Can that be water?
No.
How do you know?
Because I see that it is beer, and I know that unless if you decide to do a bunch of like chemical processes, essentially, it's not gonna.
So you're appealing to some unerrant standard, some unchanging standard, which would say that this always must be itself, like the laws of logic would say. This beer can only be what it is, which is beer, right?
Yeah, I'm basically appealing to. This is where we're gonna start disagreeing probably. My experiences, essentially, and some laws of logic within like those experiences that I've had, right?
Yeah, but your experiences are going to have to still be limited to the confines of knowledge, which is still going to be confined to the laws of logic.
Yeah, but those confines are within my reality, if that makes sense. So, okay, I'm gonna.
Yeah, well, hang on. That's true.
Yes.
Yeah, you yourself, I think, can have subjective experiences. Sure,
Yes.
I think that you can have many subjective experiences, but that really doesn't have anything to do with whether or not they're true, or whether or not you have the capacity to know things. If you think that knowledge itself has no standard for objectivity, how the hell can you say I know anything if that is the case?
Well, yeah, that's what I was gonna get to. Basically, for you to state that there is an outside, like external, like unchanging force, you would have to essentially prove that to me.
Why?
Because otherwise.
Okay, so here's the thing. I will give you philosophical proof that there is an unchanging source from which we can always appeal to for knowledge, called the laws of logic. Now, if that is not true, can you explain to me how these can be changed? If they are subjective, they should be changeable. Can you change the laws of logic, or can you not?
No, I'm saying those laws of logic can 100% not be changed in your reality.
In your reality.
The problem is...
In any reality.
You would have to prove to me a reality exists outside of your perspective, which you inherently cannot do, because you are quite literally processing everything through your perspective. Like, it would be an impossible task. For me to prove that...
In any reality... Do you think that a thing cannot be what a thing is?
Essentially, even if those rules are true, they're so confined to my reality. Does that make sense?
Even if they're confined to your reality, all I need you to do is envision a reality in which a thing isn't what it is.
Which I can't. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist
So
outside of the confines.
So in all possible realities that you can possibly come up with, it's not good enough philosophical proof for you that you can't think of a single one in which the laws of logic would not apply?
Andrew, what I'm trying to convey here, you see this box?
Yep.
Okay, let's for the audience. You are in this box.
Okay.
And you're basically saying, oh, nothing outside this box can exist because I cannot perceive of anything outside this box. But just because you cannot perceive of anything outside this box doesn't mean that there's nothing outside the box. You are confined to the box through
but
your experiences.
This is just an argument from incredulity, ultimately. What you're saying is it's possible that there are things which exist outside of anything you could ever envision. And so therefore this thing may not be true. That's just incredulity.
Yeah, no.
That's just incredulity. It's a fallacious argument. What I need you to do is tell me, based on any experience,
Wait,
subjective
I need
or
you
otherwise.
to explain to me why
I
it's
just did. I gave
no,
you the.
you didn't. You said it's fallacious, but you did not explain to me why it's fallacious.
The argument from incredulity is a fallacious argument.
You have to explain to me why you believe it's fallacious. You
Wait.
can't just say it's fallacious.
Okay, because I could be incredulous about any argument you make, right? You could say, for instance, I'm not here right now, right? And I go, well, I don't believe that. Well, that's not an argument. That's not an actual argument.
That's not my argument is essentially...
Yeah, hang on. Do you agree with me that that would be fallacious argumentation?
I would agree with you, but that's not what I'm saying.
It is what you're saying. You're saying because I can't envision something outside of anything which can even be envisioned, where the laws of logic may not be true. You're just saying conceptually there could be, but when I ask you to demonstrate a reality in which it could even be true, you still can't even do that.
No, because what I'm trying to say is that inherently every law of logic, every experience you have, everything you ever do must go through your own perception first.
Okay, but you would agree with me, even if that's true, okay? You think that other people have perceptions, right?
Yes, but I can never prove it fully.
From your perception, you think, but you do think that.
I can think that, but
Yeah.
I'll never be able to prove it fully.
But you don't really need to. You don't really need to prove it fully. We can just go off of your perceptions then. If you can't prove anybody else has them and only you have them, inside of anything in which you can envision, you, from your subjective metric, the only one which exists or is necessary, can a world exist where the laws of logic do not apply?
No, but here's the deal, right? That's
powerful philosophical proof, by the way.
But okay,
of an unchanging standard which can be adhered to for knowledge.
Here's the deal, right? If we can agree that even though I do not know or I cannot prove something outside of my own perception, that's an impossible task to do, it is still real to me, right? It is still something that is, actively affecting my life. I cannot just pretend it doesn't. It doesn't make it any less real. Does that make sense? Did I explain myself clearly?
You can say that, but I'm just going to grant it. I'm just going to grant that it's all real to you.
Okay.
So even granting that it's all real to you, right? From what is real from your perspective, can you change the laws of logic?
No, we've already gone through
just
that.
answer the question.
No, I did. I answered
so
it
if the
3
answer
times.
is yes, then that's the only standard you can appeal to for objective knowledge, right?
What, the laws of logic?
Yeah. What other objective standard can you think of which is unchanging?
Well, that's the point that I'm trying to get across is that even if there is a reality outside of my current experience, which I do not know if that's the case, whatever, there are still these basic components of our experiences. And the laws of logic, in a sense, are an experience. Right? Thinking 1 + 1 = 2 is something that you are actively experiencing, going through, thinking about, putting together.
No, I disagree. I believe that these are discovered. They're not subjective metrics of the human mind, but rather discoveries, which you find because they're true,
so
external
now
to mind.
You're presupposing an external world, which brings us back to our original problem.
Hang on. I'm not presupposing an external world. What I'm saying to you is, from your subjective metric right now, which is what you consider to be everything in reality which exists and that you could ever perceive of, from that metric, do you agree that when you pass away, the laws of logic will still be here, even if you can't perceive them?
Yeah, no, that's presupposing that there is a existence outside or after myself.
That's right. Everything is a presupposition which reduces itself to an unerring standard which has always been there and always will be there and always must have been there to assume creation or any justification for knowledge.
I don't think, what is it? I'm trying to think how to phrase this. You are basing your worldview off a presupposition that there is an external world, which I don't even 100% disagree with. What I'm trying to convey here is that it is
No. You're presupposing that you can have this conversation right now. You're presupposing that you have knowledge right now. You presuppose everything leading to this conversation, and everything you presuppose leading up to it has a requirement for knowledge, which you presuppose baked into the laws of logic, but won't grant that there has to be has to be an unerring standard. What else would you call that but God?
Oh, okay. Is it? I mean, we could get into like a theological debate about God if you want to.
I would like to move it to feminism, right? If I have substantially answered your questions so that you understand where I'm coming from my worldview.
Yes.
Okay.
I guess I'm just like a little bit uncertain when it comes to.
Well, I mean, if that's the case, then I would have to cross-examine what you gave us for utilitarianism, which wasn't much.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
We could dive into that.
Sure.
But I would like to dive into the purpose of the debate now that you know my worldview.
Okay,
the
we can
worldview
dive
itself
into
wasn't to be
feminism.
the debate, though I'm happy to do one in the future with you on this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only reason, but if anything, we'll just circle back.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, okay, because what my concern is that once we start talking about like feminism or worldview, I'm concerned that you're going to bring it back to God, which is...
I make secular arguments.
Okay, cool, awesome.
Yeah.
Great. We're good then.
Before we do that, I'll just allow TTS to come.
Ulysses the Pagan donated $100. I give Pixie prompts coming prepared and taking notes like Andrew. I don't agree with her worldview, but I appreciate her taking the debate seriously and wanting to engage.
Well, Pixie, I ran into her on quite a few panels in the Twitch poll universe, so I was happy that she was coming in to debate.
Aw, thank you. I'm happy I'm debating you right now. We're talking,
well, let's
really.
get into the debate. So let's...
Perhaps actually one question before we do that, and I think it is perhaps related to feminism. I don't know if we've had you on the panel since, Pixie, but this is something that we've brought on our dating talk panels very frequently. Are you familiar with the man versus bear question?
Yeah.
And so what the... okay, our Stream Deck tripped out there. So, I mean... Perhaps right before we get into the meat of the feminism conversation, I wanted to just hear your take on that. So the scenario is, if you ask a woman, would she rather be stuck in the woods with a random man or a random bear? Quite a lot of women respond by saying bear. What's your take on this? What's your answer to the question? And,
Am I allowed to ask what type of bear?
well, it's a random bear and a random man.
Yeah, okay. I might be wrong on this number from last time I actually researched this question or whatever. I do think that the majority or the most likely bear that you're likely to run into is a black bear. If it's a black bear, I would pick bear. If it's anything but a black bear, I would pick a guy.
Is the most likely guy you're going to run into predatory?
No, but
well, then that's weird.
No, let me finish.
All right.
Let me finish. So the reason why I say this is because even if the most likely guy I run into is not predatory or whatever, there's still like an unstable factor there, right? Where it's like, in the vast majority of cases with bears, or black bears, let's be specific, they don't know they're really apex predators. They will they have basically no freaking clue. They'll usually like run away or stay out of your way, unless if you're like threatening a cub or something and it's a mama bear, though. That's a whole different scenario. Men, I think, are a lot more spontaneous. They're obviously more intelligent, in my opinion. It could be the case where you have like a normal guy or something, and then something happens to a normal guy, maybe isolation in the wilderness for a couple of years could drive anybody crazy, and then it results into them acting out, for example. It could be a predator, or it could be somebody who, doesn't really care. Like, let's say it's a gay guy, whatever. Either way, the factor is more of an unknown versus if it's just like a black bear, which just seems like they'll stay out of your way most of the time. Now, if it's a grizzly bear, fuck that. I'll take my chances with even like a predator guy because grizzly bears will kill you on sight.
Black bears will kill you on sight too.
The vast majority of black bears are pretty they don't know. They don't realize they're apex predators. It's kind of insane. I'm not joking. I did my research on this question. I'm not going crazy.
Do you think? Let me ask you this: if you walked up to, I don't know, 100 random men on the street and just walked over and patted them on the head, versus you walked over to 100 random bears in the forest and walked over and patted them on the head, which one do you think would be more likely to attack you?
Yeah, the point is I wouldn't be patting the black bears in the head. I'll make sure like I'm staying my proper distance from them. With a guy, again, as we've established, like if black bears don't know that they're apex predator, which the vast majority don't, they're gonna stay out of your way, whatever. With a guy, even if it's like a friendly guy, like maybe he'll want to talk to me or like, you know, get towards me or whatever, and I can't really ascribe his intentions. With the black bear, we can stay out of each other's ways.
So from a utilitarian standpoint, though, wouldn't you be far more likely to be helped by a man than a black bear?
I guess it
Like,
depends
based on
if I
your
need
current-
help in that scenario.
Well, based on your current level of forest survival skills, do you think you would be up to the task on your own?
I don't think the average man knows how to survive a forest either.
I think that the average man can survive in the forest a lot better than the average woman. They're just
Maybe.
stronger, right? They're built stronger. They can just do tasks that most average women can't do.
Yeah,
They
but I
just don't
also
have the
think,
required prerequisite strength, right?
well, I think women do have the strength to live in a forest, just like how men have the strength to live in the forest. But I understand your point. You're saying, let's say there's like a heavy log or something you have to move out of the way. A man is going to be a lot better at that task than a woman.
Well, no, it's not just that. It's just even tool making requires physical strength.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I can still make a tool. Maybe it'll take me a little bit longer, but it's not going to be the end-all, be-all. But the point that I'm trying to get across, or what I'm trying to say, is that there is a chance that I might get helped, but then I'm also, you know, rolling the dice on whether there's a chance that the guy is, like, fucking insane and wants to, like, kill me or do bad things to me.
If you're such a savage, you can live in a forest. If you're just dropped in a forest with no equipment and you can just survive in there, then why aren't you savage enough to take care of yourself from a man?
What is it? There's a very big difference between being in a forest, like trying to scavenge for your own, like hunt for fish, whatever, start a fire, versus having somebody
How would you
actively
hunt for
attack
fish
you.
if you were in a forest?
If there's like a, what is it, like a freshwater stream or lake or something.
Yeah, how? How would you do it?
Ideally, I would find some sort of like small insect or bait or something like that. Try to do something maybe with like the lining of like leaves or something, basically like a little rod maybe, and use that to try to lure in the fish.
That's how you would try to catch fish in a forest?
I'm not an expert at catching fish, but if our ancestors did it for thousands of years, I'm sure that I can figure out a way through trial and error.
Okay. So I guess that really doesn't have, I don't know where we were going with that.
That was it. Let me just let this TTS come through.
LOL Paladins donated $100. Weird to see Pixie arguing W/Andrew for the existence of God. Somehow I agree with her. We are flawed humans and cannot know real objective truth and his plan for us.
Is that objectively true? Is that objectively true, Lol Paladins? Because if it's not objectively true, then why should I believe it? But anyway.
One quick thing. This is breaking news. I've received word that Desiree from the show yesterday, who she in an Instagram story states she is raffling off the underwear that she wore, fresh out, and I quote, "fresh out of the ass I used to put Andrew in his place."
What the fuck?
Yesterday on whatever, so make sure you subscribe and enter before I pick a winner Sunday night.
That's wild. That's
Fucking
horrible.
degens.
She didn't learn a thing. Anyways, sorry, continue on.
So anyway, over to feminism. So can we agree to a definition of feminism?
It's just something really boilerplate, basic.
So I give you my definition. You
Go
can
for
tell
it.
me if you like it or don't like it. I would say it's the move towards egalitarianism with the rejection of patriarchal systems.
When you're saying egalitarianism,
Equality and equity.
I'm not sure if I 100% agree with that, but we'll
So
say
then,
yes.
so
for
then,
now.
what's your definition?
Well, no. I'm gonna agree with it in general, but I know some people take that and then they bring it to an extreme. They're like, oh, so you mean like I'm trying to think of an example.
Are you full, by the way? Because people.
People
Killer of
I
Cereal
did not catch
donated
this soon.
$100. Presuming prepositions is preposterous. I propose a pedantic posturing proliferated by poor practice. Must go back to school. If only there were a university I could sign up to based around debating.
Right. That's actually a really good point. He's saying that you're actually presupposing even the idea of the subjective being in the box has the requirement of knowledge. So, I mean, that's the point. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Over to feminism. The idea on feminism, the rejection of patriarchy, and the movement towards egalitarianism. Do you agree?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm going to assume that we're being like good faith right now because some people will be like, oh, you know, you want like equality and like equity, do me? And then maybe that means I don't want equity. I'm not sure. But the same like, you know, military bracket or whatever. I'm using a random example. And it's like, well, no, only if they meet the requirements to be in that bracket. Does that make sense? Like people will take it and think that, I mean, on the basis of gender, it means that they should be exactly 100% the same, even if they're not as equally qualified.
Yeah, I don't think men and women are interchangeable widgets, or that feminists even say that they are.
Okay. Just clarifying. Okay, we're good then.
Yep. So, I mean, I think that that's fine.
Okay.
Right. So if your idea there is that their ontology is different, men and women, their being is different.
I don't. What do you mean by being like?
Well, they're not
spiritual-
Well, they're not interchangeable widgets. So what we would call telos or purpose, or the things that they're interested in, maybe from your perspective, are going to be different than the things women are interested in, and that's going to be innate somewhat.
Yeah,
Because otherwise, then we do have a problem of you thinking they're interchangeable widgets. So if you think their ontology is exactly the same, that men and women are exactly the same, then we do have a problem.
Yeah, I think if I had to draw it out again, I would say that
You do a
there's-
lot of drawing.
Yeah.
I like drawings. Go ahead.
There's probably like a scale of behaviors. I don't even like doing it this way, but I'm going to put man, woman, even though I think this is dumb because I think there's just human behaviors in general that both men and women have. But I think there's
You're
like
talking about a gender scale?
Yeah, essentially.
X amount of these qualities make you a woman, X amount of these qualities make you a man.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. That's where I would disagree. I would say that there's certain behaviors that are just human behaviors that both men and women have.
Yeah, I agree. So I would say anything that you would consider like a gendered emotions nonsense, anything you'd consider specifically a gendered behavior would be nonsense, right?
Okay.
Like if you can have tom girls, for instance, they're still females. You can have men that do little fucking tea parties or whatever. They're still men, right? They're still males.
Yeah.
So I would agree with all of that, right?
Okay,
So
cool.
I don't think that there's a specific I just think that the men and women perceive them differently, and that men and women are built differently.
Yeah.
From conception, they're built differently. Their brains work differently, and their bodies are different.
Yeah, I think there's definitely differences in body, especially in strength. The brain argument is a lot more complicated because then it becomes a question of like nature versus nurture. Like the whole idea of like female and male brain is like pretty contentious. A lot of it like
Yeah, but if you have one sex that's stronger, right, physically stronger on average, and the male sex is much stronger on average than women. Now, it's significantly stronger. The tailoring of society necessarily around that would create different interests, right?
Yes, at certain points. I think the problem is that as we have a society has evolved and as we've had like more like, let's say machinery or even like other things have just come and spawned essentially, our DNA and like biological predispositions also somewhat slightly change, even if it's like ever so slightly. So do you know like epigenetics?
Yeah, but I mean, epigenetics wouldn't even explain this in 60 years. That's insane. even from an epigenetic standpoint.
Well, from an epigenetic standpoint, like our genes are like, you know, like they're constantly changing to our environment, basically.
Yeah, it doesn't happen in one generation.
It doesn't happen in one generation.
Or
but
two,
it
or three.
No, well, it can happen pretty quickly. I mean, there's like, what is it, epigenetic studies on like, for example, women who have had
It's
children or we're
okay,
pregnant.
you gotta do me one favor though.
Yeah.
You gotta say women and not woman.
I am English is my second language. Like,
Gotta say women and not women.
Okay,
Woman.
call me out.
All right.
Women. There's
Women.
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 Woman.
No, that's.
I could say mujer if that's easier in Spanish.
Just say women.
Woman. I swear to God, I'm not being crazy right now.
All right, fine.
It's not me trying to be an asshole. It's a second language. There's epigenetic studies of women who
Women.
who are, let's say, like pregnant or whatever during like a time of strife, starvation, resources are low, and like how that like literally genetically affects their offspring to be able to like retain like fat better, for example. Or like basically things that can happen within like one generation essentially. Or even
that wouldn't apply to the societal social characteristics of the entirety of a nation when it came to the interests of men and women.
Well, what I'm trying to say is that if we can already see things like that within like one pregnancy and see like DNA changes, that it's not a giant leap of faith to assume that like over time, especially as society has like more and more changes, you'd start seeing
What kind of changes? Well, what kind of changes would you expect to see?
Let's see, in a society where physical labor and force becomes less important, essentially.
Like right now.
Yeah, or like how it has been.
What would you expect to see?
Yeah, you would expect to see basically societies that start centering intelligence as a more important component, or start selecting based more on, expected intelligence, whatever, than just pure brute strength.
Yeah, but society's not becoming smarter.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I know about that.
Okay.
IQ slated to continue to reduce on average.
Where
not
are you getting
increase.
this?
Well, I'll give you the numbers.
Yeah.
But not only that, let me bring this up as well.
Don't give me just the numbers. Give me the study.
Yeah. But let me give you the numbers on this as well. This is all CDC information, by the way. If I were to take what you're saying at face value, that necessarily through epigenetic leaps, that men and women, by the way, would suddenly begin to have different interests.
Not suddenly. It would be gradual. But over
Well, but how? And you said, what do you mean gradual? Like how long? Because you said it could happen very quickly.
It can happen very quickly.
Well, how quickly?
It could theoretically, or certain changes could happen within a generation.
Yeah. So this is CDC info. Most female jobs. This is according to the BLS. These jobs have